That brings us to the great state of California. Joe Biden is here, touring Southern California, even made a stop in LA. Now, California is all about equity, all about inclusion, all about diversity. And let me just go over some of the more recent issues we've discussed here in the great state of California. Transgender rights. There's a new Transgender Sanctuary Law. It essentially, according to the National Review, takes the principle of sanctuary cities on immigration and applies it to transgender laws. The consequence will be pitting children against parents, denying parents custody of their children, performing irreversible procedures on minors that they may later regret without parental approval or consent. Abortion. We have a bill that essentially will allow abortion up to, including the third trimester, and even beyond. Some people consider it to be infanticide. It's also a sanctuary state for other people coming in from other states who want abortions, many of which are going to be paid for by taxpayers. COVID misinformation. There's a law that will punish doctors for the medical advice they give their patients about COVID if the California state government decides it is misinformation. So you could lose your license to practice medicine if, in the eyes of California, you have been advising people in a way inconsistent with the recommendations of the CDC. Even a public health activist wrote an op-ed piece in the Washington Post against the bill. Oil company windfall profits. Gavin Newsom says that we're not going to, quote, stand by while greedy oil companies fleece Californians, close quote. And he is considering now a windfall profit tax on oil companies. Every time oil companies raise prices, there's some Democrat who wants to put together some sort of task force or trigger some sort of investigation into windfall profit taxes, windfall profit from these greedy oil companies. No one seems to ask, did oil companies just become greedy? Why did they jack up the prices now as opposed to 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, especially when you know who Donald Trump was in the White House? Did they just now become greedy? And every time they have these investigations, they always, pardon the pun, drill a dry hole. And now you want to punish oil companies. California already paying the highest prices for gasoline, $7 than anybody in the country. They've got these fuels that are designed to fight climate change. Even if you eliminated every single CO2 emission from the state of California, indeed from the country and Canada and Europe and Germany, would have no effect whatsoever on the climate because of the CO2 that is emitted by countries like China and India. And of course, this is a state that has banned the sale of new gasoline-powered cars by 2035. We're not going to stand by while greedy oil companies fleece Californians, end of quote, says our left-wing governor, more left-wing than Bernie Sanders. Now he wants to give taxpayers back money because we have a surplus. It doesn't seem to occur to Democrats like Gavin Newsom and like the supermajority of Democrats in our two houses of legislature, in the state Senate and the Assembly, that maybe, just maybe, if we have a surplus, you're taxing people too much. How about not taxing them that high in the first damn place? California, highest income tax in the country, 13.3%. I kid you not. And that's on top of the federal taxes, on top of property taxes, on top of sales taxes, which is one of the reasons why some people are leaving California. With the consumer price index increasing yet again, the stock market has been topsy-turvy. And what's our illustrious leader doing to quell the surge of inflation that's destroying American families? Oh yeah, spending more money and adding to the burden. Don't bury your head in the sand while your savings get decimated. Do something about it. Visit LarryForGold.com. Birch Gold will send you a free info kit on protecting your savings with gold in a tax-sheltered account. These are great people with almost 20 years experience converting IRAs and 401ks into precious metals IRAs. Don't allow the left to devalue your savings. Visit LarryForGold.com and claim your free, no obligation info kit from Birch Gold. Again, you can own physical gold and silver in a tax-sheltered retirement account, and Birch Gold will help you do it. Birch Gold has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, countless 5-star reviews, and thousands of satisfied customers. Check them out right now. Visit LarryForGold.com and secure your future with gold. Do it today. High-speed rail. California voters voted, don't ask me why, for a high-speed rail several years ago. They were told that it would be done by public-private sector money. There was a lot of public money, no private sector money, and that it would go from LA to San Francisco in a time that would be convenient for them. It would be so fast. Now it's not doing that, and it would also be self-funding. And it's gone from a cost of around $33 billion to well over $100 billion, and it still hasn't been built. And when Gavin Newsom ran for governor, he said he's going to shut down the program. Then he became governor, and because the unions like it, he said, well, and so now the program is still on the board. Crime. Will Joe Biden talk about crime here in California? We've got Proposition 47. We talked about that before. That allows bad guys to steal up to $950, not a day, but per store after store after store. And if you get busted, you will be written a ticket because you've committed a misdemeanor, not a felony. And of course, we have cashless bail here in California for non-violent offenses, so you will not even have to face going to jail. And then there's Proposition 57. 57 reduced a bunch of categories of crime from violent offenses to non-violent offenses, and therefore the bad guy will serve less time than he would otherwise serve. What do you mean by categories that have been reduced from violent to non-violent? Well, they include assault on a police officer. I kid you not. Assault on a police officer under Proposition 57 is a non-violent crime, meaning the bad guy will serve less time than he otherwise would. Rape of an intoxicated victim, non-violent crime. Serial arson, non-violent crime. Felony domestic violence, non-violent crime. Education. The governor signed a bill requiring everybody who graduates from high school to have taken at least one course in ethnic studies. Never mind 50% of California third graders can do math or read at state levels of proficiency, but they're going to take a course in ethnic studies because, after all, it's all about self-esteem. And the teachers in California used to have to take something called the C-BEST test, C-B-E-S-T, to ensure a minimal level of reading and a minimal level of math. But because so many of the teachers flunked the C-BEST test, they now no longer require it. All you have to do is get a B in a number of courses in college, you're good to go. And you wonder why the quality of education for our kids in government schools, 80% of whom are black and brown, is suffering. Gender-neutral toy stores. Gavin Newsom signed legislation requiring large retail toy stores to have a gender-neutral aisle. You can still have a boys section and a girls section, but for the boy who wants a girl's toy or the girl that wants the boy's toy, there's a safe space called a gender-neutral aisle just for you. Gavin Newsom signed that bill. Gavin Newsom signed a bill to require at least one member of the, quote, disadvantaged community to be on the board of directors of corporations that are publicly held that are headquartered in California. What is a disadvantaged person, you ask? Well, a member who is black, who's brown, who's Asian, who's LGBTQIA+. We've got to have at least one person like that on the board of directors if you have a publicly held business headquartered in the state of California. And I mentioned gasoline-powered cars, the ban of new cars effective 2035, and the governor already signed a bill banning the use of gasoline-powered lawnmowers and gasoline-powered leaf blowers. And then there's the AB5 legislation that makes a whole bunch of independent contractors now full-time employees, eligible for all sorts of benefits, which jacks up the price of hiring an employee. And it causes a bunch of people who are working part-time, many of whom were disabled, to no longer have jobs at all. Port mismanagement. The city owns ports in LA and in Long Beach, and they are among the most inefficient in the world. Organized labor makes improvement difficult. It is why shippers are, according to the National Review, going elsewhere. There's a fast food worker task force set up so that government bureaucrats will determine the wages of workers in fast food restaurants. And the wages are going to be at least $22 an hour. Now, what's that going to do? It's going to cause a greater emphasis on automation. Because if you're a fast food operator and there's a bunch of bureaucrats telling you that your labor costs are going to be determined by them, not by the free market, not by supply and demand, and there's going to be a minimum of $22, which is roughly $45,000 a year, you have a greater incentive to automate. And speaking of task force, finally, there's a reparations task force here in California. Now, never mind, California was not a slave state. So people living in California who are black are going to be benefiting from a reparation task force to tax other people for what happened during the era of the country where there were slaves. Don't know whether or not we're going to tax Africa, because that's where the supply chain started. If it weren't for African chieftains selling blacks to Arab and European slavers, there never would have been a slave trade. And by the way, most African slaves remained in Africa in servitude to the African chieftains who enslaved them. So after California pays black people reparations, will California then go to Africa to extract money for them because of the supply chain issue that they started there? And reparations, properly speaking, is the extraction of money from people who were never slave owners to be given to people who were never slaves. The whole thing is beyond ridiculous, but that's California. And Gavin Newsom, who's to the left of Bernie Sanders for all these reasons I just now mentioned, really thinks he's going to run for president. He may be normal and mainstream for California, but outside of California, Gavin Newsom and his policies, whack job. Hope you enjoyed that video. The full show is available to watch right now on Epoch TV. Just click the link in the description below to learn more, because we've got a country to save.